malam, Runhood Fam. Senang banget bisa kembali lagi sama kalian di YouTube Live kita di Running Connect Summit, masih pastinya. Dan tentunya Live Talks hari ini, kalian udah tahu nih ada judulnya, kita akan ngebahas tentang sports event in the new normal, yang mana artinya adalah gimana ya? Penasaran nggak sih kalian kalau misalnya kita udah memasuki fase-fase new normal nih, kira-kira nanti akan seperti apa ya? Bisa nggak sih setelah kita memasuki fase itu, kita bakalan bisa langsung ngikutin race? Kemudian apa kira-kira yang akan dilakukan oleh race organizers untuk dapat melaksanakan event-event ini? Dan apakah masih nggak ya kira-kira masih bisa dilakukan nggak event-event ini di tahun ini? Kemudian pertanyaan yang muncul mungkin di pikiran kita, aman nggak sih buat kita tetap ikutan race ini? Nah, untuk itu, kalian bisa banget temukan jawabannya di live talks kali ini. Nanti kita akan introduce lagi, kita akan kasih tahu kalian speakersnya. Tentunya mereka udah berpengalaman mengorganize ataupun mengatur berbagai race, baik di dalam maupun di luar negeri. Nah, sebelum kita mulai, kita mau ingetin lagi buat kalian yang mau berdonasi melalui Running Connect Summit, kalian bisa langsung scan barcode yang ada di sebelah sini ya, atau kalian bisa juga langsung ke link yang ada di description box di bawah, di link ke kitabisa.com/rcs lawan corona. Nah, nantinya donasi kalian itu akan di convert menjadi paket sembako dan juga paket makanan bagi pekerja-pekerja sektor informal yang terdampak pekerjaannya karena adanya pandemi COVID-19 ini. Nah, dan kita, seperti yang tadi udah diomongin di IG Stories kita, kalau kalian sempat lihat, kita bakalan bagi-bagi giveaways. Dan giveaways-nya kali ini spesial banget karena akan langsung dikirimin dari penulisnya, yaitu salah satu speakers kita hari ini. Bukunya itu menarik banget, kalian nanti akan dikasih secara gratis kalau beruntung, tentang yang membahas tentang mass participation ataupun acara-acara di dunia pastinya yang meliputi ataupun mengikuti banyak orang. Nah, selain itu kalian juga bisa kasih pertanyaan kalau misalnya kalian punya pertanyaan dengan mention kita di Twitter @runhoodmag dan atau kalian bisa post juga pertanyaan kalian di question sticker yang ada di IG story kita. Nah, langsung aja hari ini kita punya speakers yang namanya nih sama, Chris. Tapi lokasinya berbeda. Satu di Bali, satu di Jakarta. Nah, yang satu, Christopher Tobing ini adalah salah satu bagian dari Big Change Agency, yaitu salah satu agensi di Indonesia yang memang juga menangani berfokus pada acara-acara entertainment, media, dan juga sports. Nah, sedangkan yang satu lagi adalah Chris Robb, ini co-founder dari Mass Participation World, yang mana adalah Chris Robb ini di umur 16 tahunnya dia sudah mengorganize sebuah fun run. Wow. Dan sudah berkecimpung di dunia mass participation event, tentunya sports, sekitar 35 tahun. Jadi pengalamannya nggak perlu dilakukan lagi dan kita bakal temukan jawabannya dan bahas jawabannya pro dan kontranya nih tentang pelaksanaan race-race lari dan juga event olahraga lainnya di dunia. Langsung aja kita undang ada Christopher Tobing yang
Halo.
bisa dipanggil Topper ya, biar nggak ketuker ya, Topper
Hai
di
Anti.
Jakarta. And we have Chris Robb from Bali. He's in Bali now. Hi, Chris.
Well, selamat malam. Hello, how are you? Good to be here.
We're good to have you here as well. We're happy to have you. Thank you for joining us in the live talks. We're so happy. We're so glad, and we can't wait for the discussions. So, if you can give us kind of like a heads up, maybe a hint, what will you discuss? Maybe Chris Robb first. What will you discuss? In this discussion.
Yeah, look, I think whilst it's challenging times, it's really interesting times. Mass participation industry is huge all over the world, and COVID's having an impact. And the reality is that much of the world is changing forever, and so is our industry changing.
Right.
And there's some interesting changes around that we're going to share.
Okay, so there's a lot of topics and issues as well, right? people are pros towards this topic, and the other having a different perception towards a mass participation events during a time like this. Now, I'm gonna hand over this session to Topper.
Sure thing.
Dan Topper, banyak banget ya yang akan kita bahas seru-seru ya, Top, malam ini ya.
Lumayan nih, udah ada beberapa pertanyaan-pertanyaan yang udah dititipin ke gue. Jadi I'm hoping that I can deliver the questions from the people and ask Chris Robb about it, because I think Chris and I've also mentioned to Chris that we're hoping for some answers that could give us some good insights for the industry in Indonesia, Anti.
Right. Okay. So we can wait for that. So just take it away with the conversation, Topper.
All right. Thank you so much,
Guys.
Anti. Thank you. Hey, Chris, good to see you again. And,
hey, Christopher, great to see you. Thanks for the opportunity.
No worries at all. So I guess I'll go straight to the point. The purpose of this discussion today is we want to see what's happening in the mass participation event in sports. I mean, you're the mass participation event world founder, and then at the same time, I know I've been following some of your webinars that you've been interviewing people all around the world about what's happening in mass participation. So I guess today we can get to the nitty-gritty or even some tips, including what to expect in the new normal. I think that would be the goal of the conversation tonight.
Wonderful. Look forward to sharing. Absolutely.
One of the things that we want to be able to answer, or I think people are speculating right now, is, or perhaps I'll start with the disclaimer. I guess everything that we're saying is in the assumptions that sports mass participation events is going to go. We're not talking about when. I think that's a question that we're not going to touch tonight. We're not going to touch on when it's going to be able to happen. But I think what we want to ask is, when it happens, how will it look like? How will us as runners should expect what's going on? For example, from race pack collection, would it be the same? From the race experience at the start line, would it be the same? If you can share even the experiences, what is expected with the new normal for runners in a marathon or in a running event, Chris?
It's a great question, and it's a question that's on so many people's minds, Toph. And the reality is, right now, I think that across the world in many spaces, there's probably still more questions than answers. The only thing that's certainty is that it's going to be different. We're not going to have the same kind of events that we had before. Does that mean that a 30,000 people event becomes a 10,000 people event, or a 10,000 becomes a 5,000? There'll be guidelines that will be put in place in various jurisdictions. That will depend on government, guidelines. There's lots of different groups around the world that are working on coming up with guidelines. World Health Organization, World Athletics, and some of that is, as you heard this afternoon on our new normal webinar, is fairly imminent, I believe. But the reality is that I think events will probably start off small and they'll grow.
Okay.
There probably will be less touch points. So, does that mean
what do you mean less touch points?
Touch points in terms of, does that maybe mean that some races won't have a race pack collection and they'll mail their race packs out? Will there be less training camps or training runs to start with? Possibly, for the time being. The thing that I think is important to point out is that I personally believe that there are great opportunities to stage safe mass participation events. So, one of the people that we're working with is a crowd scientist from Manchester University, and he's doing all sorts of different modeling, working with he was instrumental in working with the Bundesliga. And many of you who are football fans, of which there are many here in Indonesia, would recognize that the Bundesliga has just started up again. And that came with a whole bunch of guidelines. And what we're seeing is there's more and more test cases happening, whether it be in Bundesliga, whether it be the English Premier Leagues looking at coming up, whether it be in our own space. So, this week there were announcements that in certain parts of Australia there's going to be events in June. I was on a call with someone in Vietnam that's talking about events in August and September. And I know we're not going to get into a debate of when events will start, but what I'm saying is, by the time events in Indonesia start coming online, there probably will be some case studies that we can look at from around the world. There's a big Spartan event, for example, that's due to take place in Florida in June. So increasingly, as we move forward, we will see more and more of what's worked, what hasn't worked, and hopefully there won't be too many cases of what hasn't worked, because that potentially takes us back a step. And this is where the industry is, I think, more and more collaborating to say, how do we open? When do we open? Let's open in stages like governments are doing with other things. Yes. But I'm hopeful that there'll be a time where, at the moment, what we're saying is mass gatherings are the back of the queue. And I'm hoping that they might move up somewhere in the queue. And I'm not for one moment suggesting that we should be reckless, that we should be compromising people's safety. But I think that there are ways that we could get smaller events off the ground that can be test cases.
I think that's spot on. So, and this is something that I think it's also a debate. I'm not sure whether you can answer this question or not, but I have to throw it out to you that how small is small? Because obviously it's like asking how long is a piece of string. But the idea is because maybe put some context to you, in Indonesia, 10,000 people, 12,000 people are sort of our top end range of a number of people, and in order to be able to do it safely, and I'm putting safety in a quotation here, because how small should we start as organizer, or even from runners? What would runner be expected to have a big festive events again? Is that something that's not going to happen anytime soon? Should runners start thinking that my marathon my marathon event races won't be the same? It won't have the number of spectators, the number of marshals. Is that what's going to happen when you say start small, meaning not only the amount of numbers of runners, but also the people working on it? Is that...
Yeah, look, absolutely. I think, again, some of this is going to be driven by government decisions about what the limitations are. And, if it's 500 people that the limit, does that mean 500 people with volunteers, which reduces your numbers? To answer your question, is it going to be a big festival? I think in the short term, it's probably not going to be a big festival. It's probably going to be more like your time trial type of event with small waves of people going off to maintain the social distancing. What will aid stations look like? Hearing many conversations of events saying we'll either have lots of layers of water and participants help themselves to water, or we'll be encouraging participants to bring their own drink bottles, which they pre-fill, and we have filling opportunities for them along the way. So for people that are coming out for a social and fun experience, that's going to be okay. For people who want to run a personal best, that's probably going to impede them if they have to stop to fill up with water, again, depending on the distance. We don't want to be compromising safety by saying, okay, I'm going to run a half marathon with one bottle of water because I don't want to stop and slow myself down in my personal best. So sensibility is going to have to prevail. But certainly I think the big crowded start pen, the big post-event carnival, those kind of things might take some time to take back. The expo with the race pack. Look, the reality is we're all going to supermarkets, aren't we? In some instances, people are going to wet markets. The beauty that I think we have in a mass participation event is we're one directional. You go to the supermarket, the aisles are 1.5 meters wide. I'm going down this aisle, you're going down this side. We're crossing each other in the way, even though we're wearing a face mask. In a marathon, let's assume that we have a big enough start pen with 200 people in it, and we send that wave off, and a few minutes later we send another 200 people, and there's enough space to maintain that social distancing. I think there's opportunities to do this safely. The real thing is, though, that the onus to some degree is going to have to be put on the participants as well. The organizers obviously have a responsibility to put the guidelines in place, to manage the start waves, to manage the aid stations. And then, like we do as people walking down the street or going for a run in the park or whatever that may be, some of the onus is going to be on us as participants to say, well, I'm not going to run side by side with Topher because that's not sensible social distancing. I'll keep my distance. Much like, in triathlons, they have drafting rules in the cycling
I was thinking about that as well, yes.
So there's a perfect analogy for that, is that maybe we have to have running drafting where you have a sin bin box if you're too close to someone and you get pulled over. But I think if sense prevails, there's certainly an opportunity. And, the reality is what we're seeing all over the world is beaches are opening and people are going to the beaches and together, and shopping centers are opening and people are going into those shopping centers. So I think that there's opportunities for us in our industry to be sensible and smart about putting those guidelines in place.
I think you put on it. You touch on a point on putting guidelines, protocols, and I think that's where you're saying. I'm looking at my notes. You're saying the WHO, the World Athletic Organization, the IAAF, they're all working together to create these guidelines, right? Now, one of the things that we could assume through these guidelines, that would means there will be a lot more protocols, a lot more sequence that us as runners have to experience. Does this assume that the cost of race will increase from the organizer point of view, which means that participants cost will also increase? Is that a good assumption to have, Chris?
Look, it's a great question, Topher, and I think the answer is that is still in discussion. I think, come back to your guidelines first. There will be some global guidelines which will then need to be localized. So, they'll need to be applied to a particular event. They'll need to apply to government rules. They'll be applied to the size of the event and so on. The discussions that I'm having with a number of organizers, so you were just on a webinar which I came off this evening, the new normal. We had the race director of Chicago Marathon on there. We had the medical director of the Singapore Marathon. Singapore Marathon's 50,000 participants. They're doing their planning for a December event, and part of the discussion is that from an overall budget perspective, there might be we can need to take some stuff away here, and there might be some extra cost there. So some of the perception in the industry is that we might need to take out some of the frills of the event. So for example, I mentioned less touch points. Yes. Volunteers would typically have, in many countries, there'd be training sessions for volunteers. Those are happening virtually now, so there's some cost being saved there. Volunteer numbers might end up being reduced because you won't have so many people at aid station. That's another reduction. So maybe your savings over here, undoubtedly there'll probably be more medical costs, so masks, protective device, maybe more medical staff. So is there an opportunity to kind of balance the seesaw to the point that you're making, that hopefully the cost doesn't get passed on to the participant? I think that that's a possibility, but there's no guarantees. The other risk that we have is that in some markets, sponsors are committing. In other markets, sponsors are saying reduce numbers, reputational risk. What if I'm a sponsor of an event and it ends up being a COVID spreader type of thing, and my brand gets associated with that? So is that commercial model for organizers going to change, where they're going to say, well, we don't have so we have to increase the entry fee? I'm not sure, but that's going to vary case by case. Absolutely.
Thank you for the answer. I think that puts people in perspective as well of the different expectations about registering for the events in the new normal. Now, Chris, one of the things that race event, what should we think about to make sure that we're healthy?
Yeah, look, it's a really great question. So taking the one of the medical certificate first, and there's been a lot of discussion around that. I think the challenge with that is, I could have coffee with you today and you have COVID-19. I don't know you have it. You don't know, whether I have it. You get a medical certificate from your doctor yesterday and you're healthy, and by the time you turn up at the race, you've got COVID and you potentially are transmitting it to people. And I think, medical certificate, I hope doesn't come, and I'm not certain of the value of that. But from a participant perspective, the question you asked, absolutely be sensible. Do the right amount of training. If you don't believe that you've trained well enough, your example that you shared with me, doing a half marathon with 2 weeks of training.
Don't tell anyone about that.
That was top secret, but you're an elite athlete. but so those kind of things, if you've only done 2 weeks of training, don't push yourself so that you're going to injure yourself. If you feel unwell at the start of the event or during the event, pull out, come back next year. There's always going to be an opportunity to run again. Better not when ending up in hospital. But I think, being sensible and reasonable is really important in that situation.
I think I totally agree. And I think this puts, I know people that are listening to this, some are runners, some are organizers. Having that education of sensibility what is sensible and what is reasonable would be a key factor here. I mean, a lot of the guidelines are still gray area. It's still easy to manipulate those guidelines, saying, "Oh, I'm healthy," and all that. But what are some of the best practices out there in the world to teach about this reasonability and sensibility that you think could apply here for us Indonesians? Meaning not necessarily Indonesian people, but people that are living and running in Indonesia, regardless of their race.
Yeah, look, I think, the first one is training. Make sure that you do the training. Most important to be hydrated, particularly in the climates that we have in Southeast Asia, whether it's Indonesia or elsewhere in the region. Make sure that you try, and if you're traveling for an event, try and leave some adaptation time. So, when I was race director of Singapore Marathon, we had a number of cases of Japanese runners coming from a Japanese winter to the equator and ending up in our medical tent because they arrived the day before, they were jet lagged, they ran the event. So, trying to be in a situation where you give yourself enough time to acclimatize, you've done the training, you're hydrated, and most important, if you get a chest pain, if you've got a cold, stop, don't enter the event, don't put yourself at risk.
Yeah. One of the things that people keep asking is the use of a mask, because right now I think you're allowed to run outside in a group of less than 5 people, and you have to use a mask for a social, for an exercise point of view. Do you think these rules will follow through to an actual race where we have to use a mask or perhaps some sort of a face shield or any protective gear? Do you see this as a potential thing?
Look, I'm not sure that it will. And what's interesting is every Monday I host calls, which I think you might have been on, from people around the world. I just run a free Zoom chat room, and people from all over the world dial in. And most weeks on our morning call, there's someone tuning in from New York. And he said there's a real issue in New York at the moment with lots of runners out in the parks and everything not wearing face masks. Like less than 10% is wearing face masks, and the general public is getting angry because they're blaming the runners and saying, you're potentially being unsociable by not wearing masks. So, if that's kind of like the way that runners are feeling about it there, how well is it going to go if it's enforced on them an event? Maybe there'll be no choice. Maybe government agencies in some countries will say you can have your event, but everyone needs to wear a mask. I think the reality is it's something that you can get used to if you're prepared to. Wear a mask, train with it for a couple of weeks. If you're keen to participate in an event and that's the guidelines that are put out, you have the choice of saying, well, I'll run an event or I won't run in an event, and make the decision to wear a mask. The problem is, how do you define a mask? There's so many different masks out there. In many instances it's cloth, and you read different stories about does that really help or not. So my sense is that for it to be imposed by the authorities, it's going to have to be a properly manufactured one. And who knows whether that's going to be something, but my sense is possibly not.
Yes. Okay. I think that's spot on. I love the fact that you're saying train if it's something that has been put as a guideline, you need to train with it and be responsible with it. If not, it's your choice in order to participate or not. Now, one of the things that I think everyone is trying to do is risk assessment, both from the runner's perspective. Is this event safe enough? And organizers are trying to make sure that when they do the event, it's as safe as possible. What do you think are some of the key components that runners should check on if this is a safe enough event, or it meets the criteria of a safety standard?
Yeah, look, there's a number of things. Obviously, your social distancing plans, how big your start waves are, your volunteers, what kind of medical support the event's going to have. So if you're standing in the shoes of a runner, those are the things that you're going to be looking towards. How well are they communicating with you? Generally, for me, is always a good sign. An event that's giving you good and clear communication, that's that's communicating on time. You're generally going to get a sense, if they're organized in that sense, they're hopefully going to be organized in their operational sense.
Right.
What kind of guidelines are they giving you? How clear is the information that's being sent to you? But those are some of the key areas. What are their rules around drink station? The start waves I've touched on. Those are going to be some of your kind of key areas. I think what's happening at the finish line. So if you're a runner who's maybe feeling a little bit uncomfortable, the course to me is the least of the concerns, because once the run starts, generally it will spread out.
Yeah.
So you want to look at how are they setting up their start area, how are they setting up their expo, and how are they setting up their finish? Do you have plenty of space to flow out? Are there going to be big gathering areas, or have they got social distancing plans in place? And the reality is that probably that socializing at the event is not going to happen. So maybe your socializing is that you meet up with your running buddies somewhere down the road. Go for a coffee and you sit and have social distancing, or you go and makan somewhere in the area around the finish line.
Right. I think thank you for that answer. And as organizer, I think we've touched about this before the call. There are tools around in order to be able to do that for start line and finish line. And I think some of the callers here, I know in Indonesia, one of the things, our communities like to create their own events. Yes. So I think whether it's a large event, small events, and what are some of the tools that are available on the market that allows us to, be more precautious about this COVID-19 and social distancing thing? Yeah,
so one of the ones is called One Plan. So
One Plan.
One Plan, yeah. So it's a UK-based one, and it's it allows you to model your start, to plan where your toilets might be, your start lines, all those kind of things. If anyone would like to email me, chris@chrisrobb.asia. Very happy to share the links to those and a couple of others, which might be useful to people to be able to use.
Nice. Thank you. Thanks for that, Chris. And I'm hoping everybody in this call would jump on their email and start asking you that question right away.
Yeah, and look, happy. And, the mass participation world has a number of, kind of free resources that we put out every week. The webinar just watched, the weekly calls. If there's people in the industry here that like to join on those, there's no charge. And, we got industry experts from all over the world. Crowd scientists from Manchester University was on one a couple of weeks ago. We did volunteers last week with some experts from all over the world. And the idea is to share the knowledge. The industry is growing here in Indonesia, and if we can share some of this experience and make it safer for organizers and participants, absolutely delighted to help.
Definitely. You mentioned about sponsors, I think early in the call before. Now, is there an opportunity for sponsors at this time? Because as you know, sponsorship normally is about where are the crowds? That's where you create some activation. The race expo, for example, all around the world, the best practices that's where sponsors will speak to the runners, communicate with the runners. And even from runners' perspective as well, it's actually it's a fun thing to go to the expo, looking at all the shoes brand, clothing brand, and enjoying the whole experience of what the sponsor have to offer. Do you think in the new normal, we'll see less sponsor, meaning we'll see less, less giveaways, and even from sponsors could find a new opportunity in this era?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. My gut is that initially sponsor budgets might reduce.
Yeah.
But I think this sector presents a great opportunity for sponsors to engage, and it's moving way beyond the traditional branding, logo on T-shirt, A-boards at the finish line, finish gantries. The reality is that whether you're doing a marathon or a 5K or a 10K event, you go on a journey. You sign up, you train. Yep. That journey might be 2 months, it might be 6 months if you're doing a marathon. And the opportunity for brands to engage and support those runners on their journey, or triathletes or whoever they might be, is massive. And I think it's one of the biggest missed opportunities in the industry, is too often you see sponsors coming in just from a branding perspective. I think that there is huge opportunity to create engagement in the digital space, share the journey, engagement up to the event and past the event for brands that think about ways to activate around it. And it's not just about giving away goodies, it's creating elements around the event. And there's plenty of examples of brands that are being brave and moving forward. I interviewed the head of marketing earlier this week. I ran a thing called the Aid Station, which I think you're, I interviewed. You're going to be on that. It's it's people from the industry all over the world, from CEO of Ironman to people all over the world. And the head of marketing for Techcombank, which is a big supporter of mass participation in Vietnam, the Ho Chi Minh Marathon, Ironman 70.3. She was saying, this is part of our marketing strategy. Sponsorship is really important to us. There was just an announcement that Sanlam, a big sponsor of the Cape Town Marathon, which is one of the biggest marathons in South Africa, it just did a 3-year renewal that was announced this week. So
even during this time, they just
even during this time, and so there's some brands that are saying, we don't want to take the risk, we don't want our brand to be associated with something. There's other brands saying, here's a great opportunity for us to show leadership, here's an opportunity for us to show commitment to the community. And look, there's no doubt, all over the world, everywhere I speak, countries all over the place, running and cycling and outdoor activity has exploded in this time. And I think it's been the same in Indonesia. So does that mean we can't guarantee that those people will transfer into mass participation events? But hell yeah, I think that there's a really good chance they will. And it's been families. You're hearing all over the place that families are getting out. So there's generations of people that might come in this. The running boom of the 70s and 80s, this is where this industry, that's where it started. And it exploded. And it wouldn't surprise me to see a new running boom. Does that mean that it's going to be 10, 20, 30,000 city center events? Maybe it's going to be second tier events. Maybe it's going to be destination events. Maybe it's going to be boutique experiences. I think people are looking for experiences. They're reconnecting with nature. They're looking for the outdoors. They're looking for family time, friend time, connection time. I think it might take another year, 2 years to get back to the numbers that were there. But I think this industry is going to explode in the next few years.
Well, I'm smiling to listen to that. It's good to be a part of industry that's going to explode and it's going to be big. Now, one of the things that even say you're saying it's going to be big, it's going to be rising, but yet at the same time, I know what's been rising lately in my notifications are virtual races. Is this a new? I'm not saying new because it's been there for a while, but the growth of virtual races in the last months have been significant. Do you think it's a lasting trend, or it's going to create two masses saying I'm a virtual race fans, or no, I'm a mass participation fan? So meaning that as we're going to see two different types of runners that are I'm going to run on my treadmill, on my Strava, on my watch, just run my complex, but there are some runners that I want to see everywhere. What's your take on this?
It's a really great question. I think there's two elements to it. Fundamentally, human beings are gregarious people. They like the interaction. They like to be with people. They like to train with people. They like to run with people. And that's why the event's been successful. I think that there are some events that are knee-jerking and creating virtual events as a replacement. And in many markets, that replacement is being created simply because they don't want to give a refund of an entry fee. So they're saying, I'll create a virtual event. I gave you some value, hence I don't need to give you a refund. But the smart events that are creating virtual events as a customer acquisition, as a customer engagement that becomes part of a bigger strategy for year-round engagement, are going to be the ones that are going to survive and endure. So so to answer your original question, will there be two schools? I don't think so. But will virtual events be part of the engagement strategy of good event companies and good brands? So you enter an event and you've got a 6 months lead time, and maybe part of that is doing some virtual stuff, and that concludes with the pinnacle of running in the event. Those people will do great. But the people that are going to say, I'll give you a virtual event, I'll send you your t-shirt and medal. What are they doing? They're completely eroding the value of the event by giving you your t-shirt and your medal for running on your treadmill. it completely takes all of the value out of what's being created, I believe,
Yes.
unless it's priced at a completely different point. So, you know, the summary of that is, yes, I think they're here to stay, not as a mainstream, as part of an engagement strategy, but it needs to be a year-round ongoing strategy.
I think that's spot on. It's something to be sustainable and to make sure that it's not just a knee-jerk, as you said, yet it's a whole journey and whole experience that is being transferred just from offline to online. Now, this is something that a lot of the runners here in Indonesia is very keen to know. I think rather than the question of the when or the what, it's the how. How do you think this the journey with the normal? I mean, we've touched on different points in our discussion today, but do you see it's gonna be registrations, going to the city, and then going to the city, you travel to the city, and then after that you stay in a hotel? Or do you see that traveling experience, the traveling journey would be different now? People are, okay, I'm gonna be one day and I'm coming in the night before and I'm leaving as soon as possible to avoid the interaction. Is that gonna happen?
Yeah, look, it's a great thing.
I know. I'm asking you to predict what's happening. I'm sorry for this, but I guess it's
No,
more from what you've heard.
Happy to. And you know what I'm saying, and I'm getting asked these kind of questions often, is I'm saying anecdotally, look at what's happening as cities and countries are starting to open up. You know, we sat in these weekly calls for probably 4 or 5 weeks, and the reality is that, you know, whilst it feels like COVID-19 has lasted forever for some people, we're only, you know,
3 months,
8 to 12 weeks into this, and you know, it's still evolving and lots of things happening. But if you look at what's happening, for example, they started opening the beaches so come back to what I was saying. We were sitting around saying runners are going to be terrified to come back to events. They're going to be worried about their safety. They're going to be worried about all that. What I am now seeing happening in places leads me to be less concerned about runners being scared to come and participate in events, because they open the beaches in Perth and people are crammed. They open the parks in America and people are crammed in. You know, they open shopping centers and people are pouring into shop. They open restaurants and bars, and you know, they talk about social distancing, but as soon as the restaurant gets full, every table's full and people are sitting next to each other. So I believe that there are opportunities for running, as I said, running events to almost be safer than what's happening in normal life. You walk down a street, and I haven't been in Jakarta, but you walk down a street in Jakarta. Is the street busy? Am I passing you here and there? It is busy.
It's getting busier.
I go to downtown Denpasar, and you know, people are queuing up at their favorite warungs, and people are in the markets and whatever. So my sense is that if we give the participants the confidence that it's going to be safe, and we put on well-organized events, people are going to want to have that experience that they've had before. They're going to want to connect with their friends. Does it mean that they'll race into town, only stay one night and go out? I'm not so sure. I think they'll come in and say, this is an experience. We'll go out to dinner and we'll practice social distancing at dinner or not. We'll go and participate in the event and we'll go out for breakfast. We might not hang around at a carnival afterwards if there's one, but we'll go out and we'll makan together afterwards and we'll build a weekend of it. I think that people are dying for that. I think that's not a good to use with COVID. People are craving this opportunity to connect again. People are craving the opportunity to socialize, and I think that once they get that confidence, you've got lots of on this to get the feedback from them in the chat box, maybe of what they think. You know, would they feel safe going out and participating? But my sense is, what I'm seeing anecdotally all over the world is that you know, if people can go and stand shoulder to shoulder in the middle of COVID on the beach, once this thing starts to level out, I see them being quite comfortable coming back to events.
I think to wrap it up from your perspective is that at the end of the day, it's not hard to get people to come in once the government open the gate. The challenge would be how to create the guidelines. The challenge would be how people are sensible enough in order to follow the guidelines. Not, I mean, people, the first race that everyone's gonna go, I assume it's gonna be like, hey, I haven't seen you for a while. You want to hug them, and you want to touch them, you want to do the high fives. And I think that's the point where both as organizers and even as runners, we need to have that handbrake, I guess, to make sure that, hi, let's just do air bump rather than high five. And this sensibility, and I think you're saying sensibility, and to make sure that, to understand that there is still a journey to be held, even though that journey right now as a runner would probably slightly different. The big expo perhaps not going to happen in the near future, but perhaps there's going to be a lot more trainings. There's going to be a lot more virtual trainings, a lot more activities that can happen. You're also saying start small. I think this is a good point. I think people as runners should expect that all the events would be smaller scale events. Smaller meaning could be 50% decrease, 80% decrease. We never know. We don't know until it happens. And at the end of the day, to follow the guidelines that has been set by the organizer. I think that's something that is key here, and to communicate and listen to what organizers have created. I think that's something that as runners or even as organizers, we need to be able to have this two-way communication to make sure that this event is both safety for me to run and this event is safety for you to run. Is that sort of sums it up?
Look, I think it's a great point. And the other point that I would make to organizers, and you indicated that there's probably a few organizers on the call as well, is that now is the time to start planning. Don't be sitting back and waiting for the government to come to you and say, this is what you need to do. My recommendation is wherever you are, if you're across Indonesia, wherever you are, start putting in plan A, plan B, plan C, plan D. This is what we plan to do.
Yeah.
Try and get a seat at the table with the government and say, sit with the police, sit with medical, whoever your permitting authorities are, and say, this is what we propose. We would like to work with you to find a mutually agreed solution.
Yeah.
And then once you reach that solution, communication is key. So if I'm a runner and I don't know what the plan is, how do I know what I need to do? So your communication needs to be very clear.
Yeah.
But I would really, really encourage the event organizers, now is the time to be reevaluating your plans, looking at what you're doing, trying to adopt best practice from other parts of the world, or whatever you see, research, whether it's attending some of our webinars or doing research online, but coming up with some scenarios and going proactively to the agencies rather than wait for another 2 months for the government to say, okay, next month we can start mass participation events, and you then have to scramble to get your plan in place. Get your plan in place and try and get it collaboratively rather than being told that this is what you need to do.
Agree. Thank you so much for that. And if I may add, for all the runners, to read what's happening as well. I think that's also key here to understand, not just assume that when there is a race happening, it's going to be okay. Read and ask questions to the organizers on how it's going to happen, because I think everybody needs to take part on this as runners, as organizers, to make sure that everything is safety.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, Chris. And I'm sure Auntie's already listed a few questions from the audience here.
Yes, we actually got a lot of questions. Great discussion, guys, so far. We really enjoyed it. I personally really enjoy it. You guys mentioned about health certificate for participants in the next events. Then there's one question from Melika Rosandi regarding that. Before the start line, how might an organizer filter through the participants' eligibility? Would there be an easier way for the organizers, or probably like for the marshals standing by, to really differentiate the participants whether they are eligible to enter the start line or not, other than the health certificate?
Look, it's a great question, and I think the key to that is what screening process is put in place. It might be an online screening process whereby Participants have to click a number of points when they register. We had the discussion of, my sense is that, the value of a medical certificate when I could have been exposed to someone with COVID 2 days before I come to the start line. I'm just not certain that achieves anything. But, the old guidelines are going to be there is that, if you've got a bib number and you're entitled to be on the start line, that's going to be the key is that, there's only runners with a bib number and a timing chip in it, or whether that's on the shoe, are able to be at the start line, and the pens are filtered in such a way to allow those people to come into the start line.
And I think I might add on that. I think some of the discussion that I've heard around in the industry is also necessarily to get not to limit from the health certificate, but to get people to be sensible to say, no, I'm not going in because I'm not healthy. I think that's also key, to get people to do a self handbrake, saying, no, I'm not going there because I'm not feeling well.
Mm-hmm. So it has to be coming from two different sides, so from the organizers, but from the runners as well, because that's very important. Regarding the mass participation event, we talk about, that we have to communicate in a more strategic way in promoting this mass events in the new normal. There's this one question from Zulkifli. Christopher, you can jump in as well, because this is regarding the agency. How do you think organizers could optimize digital assets as part of mass participation events moving forward? Probably not only digital assets, but also probably digital communication in promoting their events.
Well, I'll jump on a big picture first, but then Chris, I think you can jump in after me. One of the things that I've seen personally, and I'm just talking in Indonesia, is that everybody has already started to moving digitally. Now, the challenge right now with a lot of organizers or a lot of events are they're only doing to announce the refund, the changing dates, the whatever it is, the rescheduling that they're doing, rather than keep communicating as the brand, whatever marathon that you're doing, 10K, you can still communicate on regular basis in order to make sure that communication happen. And as Chris was saying, the journey that runners have is still there. I think this is a digitally is a tool that everybody should have used 5 years ago, but now everybody must use right now, because there's no other way in order to be able to do that. And I'm sure you have some good experience as well on how some of the major marathons or marathons around the world, Chris, have they done the same thing?
Yeah, look, I think I said when this started is that the events and the companies that communicate and engage the best are going to be the ones that come out of this stronger. And it's not just in our industry; it's brands generally and companies in this situation. And I've been saying, in fact, I run an annual conference called Mass Participation World in Singapore, and our theme in last year's conference was Mass Participation 365. There were 70 speakers from all over the world. And I think that the biggest missed opportunity in our industry is that we don't engage with our participants on an ongoing basis. So the typical model is TOFA entries for the marathon have opened. Please sign up. Thanks for signing up. Here's your training program. This is what you need to do for your race pack collection. Thanks for running. Here's your e-certificate. And then 6 months of silence. And then we start the same process next year, as opposed to this ongoing engagement. And those same companies have got this massive database of people that have participated in their event, and they're going and spending money over here to acquire new customers when they're not even speaking to their existing customers. And as I say, I think that works. There's runners here who are not running event businesses. That works for any successful business. If you've got customers, keep them loyal by being engaged with them authentically. You're not selling to them all the time. You're giving them useful information. You're solving their problems and talking to them on an ongoing basis. But we have so much amazing content in our industry because everyone has a personal story. Everyone has a personal challenge. And there's nowhere better to put that out than in the digital space. So right now in these times, there's so many amazing stories of your runners, of what they're doing to train, to keep safe.
I agree.
I interviewed a lady for my aid station today in South Africa. She's got a 50-meter car park, and she ran 25 kilometers in her 50-meter car park in one session. What a great story that made if it was videoed and shared. There's so many of those stories happening across Indonesia.
Right. Talking about race in Indonesia, one of the most interesting way to invite people to come to the race or to join the race is the cheering stations. Now, considering with this pandemic and the cheering stations being one of the most interesting things that people are looking forward in an event, what should we do with that, Chris? Probably, from a mass participation point of view, you have quite a replacement for that, maybe?
Yeah, look, I think the reality is that things are definitely going to change. So recently the Tokyo Marathon, they kept the mass participation element of it, had an elite-only event
Elite
that was
only.
on TV, and they encouraged the spectators not to come out. London just
Right.
put out a release. There's talk that whether London will go ahead or not, which is due in late September. And they spoke about the possibility of an elite event. Elites running through quiet streets, not ideal. Are there ways that you could have a scaled down version of a cheering station? Absolutely. I think, you could have bands that are socially distanced. You could have cheering spaces which are socially distanced. Is it extra work? Possibly, probably.
Right.
But, it doesn't mean that they have to be running on empty streets. It's probably a little bit more planning and engagement. And again, it's going to come back to the responsibility of the spectators.
Agree.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, Topher, as an agency,
Yes.
talking about the same thing still. This is regarding the cultural branding, of a mass
Yeah.
event, a sports event. Do you think that there should be another approach, a new approach, to still, invite the runners to come and join the events?
To register or to come to the event?
Both, I
What
think.
do you?
Yeah.
I think to from what I guess after the discussion with Chris,
Mhm.
in order to be able to get runners to come in, what you need to be able to let them know is you're still gonna have the experience and it's going to be safe. I
Right.
think that's the culture that we need to implement. I think that's the
Mhm.
culture that the whole world is trying to do.
Yeah.
Is to find the balance between not destroying the experience,
Right.
yet at the same time safety is number one.
Mhm.
And whoever finds that sweet spot will be able to create the first one without a flaw. But for people to actually come into the race on the day, I think it's about the sensibility that
Mm.
Chris was saying, and the responsibility as runners. I think we need to know and we need to recheck ourselves when we go out for a run, whether it's on daylight, just normal day, or when we go to a race, to make sure that we are in a safe condition to run with
Right.
other people or not. And I think this is something that a new culture that us as runners needs to have. Am
Right.
I safe enough to go out and exercise with another person?
Yeah.
Am I in good condition? Am I healthy? Have I trained to go there? I don't think we have more. There's less and less space for runners that want to do it just with mindset alone.
Right.
I think we need to have that logical runners to start coming in, and logic comes in and making sure double, triple check whether I'm fit enough, I'm healthy enough, and at the end of the day, I'm responsible enough to do what it takes to run the course.
Okay, so it's about everyone's responsibility. It's not only about the organizer's responsibility, but it's everyone's responsibility, including the runners as well, because they play an important role as well. Now,
Yes.
this is another prediction. Topher mentioned that he was sorry to ask Chris to make a prediction, but I think a lot of people have been asking how soon can we start the event, even though we don't go back to the normal way, but how soon can we start the event as soon as we enter into the new normal?
Well, I promise I'm not gonna ask that question, Chris, but I didn't promise Auntie's not gonna ask that question.
Well, so what I can share with you, and again, it varies from country to country. Obviously, Asia is probably ahead of Europe and America, where COVID arrived later.
Right.
But on this evening's call, we ran a poll of the people that were on the webinar, and I asked the question on the poll of when people are expecting to start their events, recognizing that this was an audience from all over the world. We had as far afield as South Africa, Australia, and across to America and Europe. And the bulk, the highest at 28 or 30%, was September, the expectation.
Yep.
Right.
There were some of them that were forecasting Q1 2021, and some of them even for Q2 2021. So, the reality is that there's events starting in Australia in June. There's a Spartan event happening in Florida in June as well. People in Vietnam are telling me that there's a calendar talking about August, September. I was on a call with someone in Israel saying that the calendar's just come out. The Tel Aviv marathon is going to be in September. So, again, there's so many different elements to this. Do we have a second wave as people come out of lockdown? What are the government going to say? Where does mass participation sit on the curve? 2 weeks ago, I was saying I'd be surprised if there were any events until 2021. Now I'm a little bit more optimistic, but my gut is, if you would ask me to make a prediction, I would think it's more likely going to be November, December rather than sooner.
So the end of this year, towards the end of this year.
Towards the end of this year. Yeah.
All right. I think thank you so much for the conversation, for the discussion. Very interesting. There's a lot of comments coming in, but we cannot answer them all. But probably later on, if there's still questions as well, we can ask you guys, and then we're gonna put it in the Insta story. But before, there you go. Upper already giving us a hint that we're gonna giving 2 books from the author himself, from Chris Robb. He's gonna send it directly to the people who win the giveaway. Now, that book is about mass participation sports events. So if you want to know more about mass participation sports event written by Chris Robb himself, this is a great chance to win that book for free. Probably with your signature, Chris.
Yes, absolutely, with my signature. Yeah.
All right, all the way from Bali. Okay, we're gonna announce the name. We got one who posted a comments on our a post on Instagram. There is Barin.
Oh,
Barin.
I know him.
Congratulations, Barin, for winning one of the books that we are giving away to you. And another one is Zulhilmi Zulkifli, whose question we answered before. Congratulations. We're going to contact you for the address, and Chris himself will send you the books with his signature. Okay, guys, before we close the live talks, we would like to have a quick photo session. We don't have to do anything, but our friends at the back, they will screenshot for fame. Okay, so let's take a picture. Let me count to 3. 1, 2, 3. Cheese. Thank you.
This is weird.
I know, right? You got to post, but like nothing is happening in front of you. All right, thank you so much, Chris Robb. So glad to have you. We hope that we can talk to you again very soon.
Thank you, Auntie. It was wonderful. Thank you.
Yes.
so much, guys.
Thank you, Christopher Tobing from Big Change Agency. Such a good insights that you put in and ask the questions that you asked to Chris. So thank you, guys. We hope to talk to you again very soon, and we hope that we can probably meet, not only virtually but physically, very soon here in Jakarta. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you so
Bye.
much. All the viewers, have a good night.
You
Bye-bye.
too. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Auntie.
Dan Runhood Fans, itu tadi perbincangan kita atau diskusi kita tentang sports events in the new normal atau sports events in the new normal atau gimana sih kira-kira race ataupun olahraga event-event olahraga lain yang akan terjadi di dalam masa new normal ini. Nah, buat kalian yang masih punya pertanyaan ataupun yang pertanyaannya belum kejawab, kalian boleh DM lagi kita di Instagram atau mention kita di Twitter, atau bisa juga langsung isi question sticker kita yang masih ada di IG story. Nanti kita akan coba jawab, kita akan kasih pertanyaan kalian ke Christopher Tobing dan juga Chris Robb, dan kita akan kasih jawabannya secepat mungkin di Instagram kita atau melalui Twitter. Dan mau ingetin lagi sekali lagi untuk kalian yang masih mau berdonasi, masih ada waktunya sebelum Running Connect Summit ditutup tanggal 5 Juni nanti, jadi buruan supaya nggak lupa. Kalian bisa langsung ke website Kita Bisa, linknya ada di description box. atau ke www.kitabisa.com/RCS lawan corona. Dan seru banget memang ya perbincangan kita pada malam hari ini, dan kita masih punya lagi live talks lainnya, seru lainnya minggu ini dan juga minggu depan. Dan ada live classes, dan kali ini topiknya menarik banget nih. Hari Sabtu ini jam 9 pagi kita punya easy coffee brewing at home. Buat kalian para pencinta kopi, kita nanti akan ngajarin kalian gimana sih caranya nyeduh kopi ala-ala cafe gitu deh, tapi nanti akan dipandu oleh Anomali Coffee. Dan untuk kalian juga yang masih mau nih training tentunya dengan trainer profesional dari Runhood, kita punya kelas Runhood Performance hari Sabtu nanti. Jangan lupa daftar, langsung aja cek postingan kita di Instagram untuk informasi selengkapnya. Jangan sampai telat karena kita juga pastinya mau banget kalian join dan juga bergabung di hari Sabtu pagi nanti jam 8. Nah, untuk itu kalian yang masih mau cek jadwalnya juga ada apa lagi sih Running Connect Summit, yang penasaran bisa langsung juga ke website kita di www.runhood.id. Jangan juga lupa untuk follow Twitter kita, Facebook kita, dan juga Runhood Instagram kita di Runhood Magazine. Siapa tahu ada yang belum follow para penonton di sini. Dan tentunya juga di YouTube channel ini jangan lupa subscribe supaya nggak telat ya kalau misalnya nanti kita punya sesi-sesi berikutnya, karena sayang banget kalau telat dan juga ketinggalan. So, kita masih mau ketemu kalian lagi. Terima kasih untuk partisipasinya hari ini. Udah balik lagi di Running Connect Summit. Oh iya, lupa nih dari tadi diucapin selamat Lebaran walaupun agak sedikit terlambat. Mohon maaf lahir batin. Semoga kita semua bisa menjalani hari-hari yang penuh berkah ke depannya. Thank you for joining us guys. Once again, have a good evening. Kita ketemu lagi secepatnya. Take care, bye.